welcome back. Been feeding my sourdough, and I decided that instead of discarding this, I was going to go ahead and make myself a nice sourdough loaf. The recipe that I'm going to be using is based on the Overnight Country Blonde from Ken Forkish's fabulous flour, water, salt yeast. However, two things: I don't have wheat flour, I don't have rye flour, so I'm going to be using this with 100% white flour. And because my starter is a 100% hydration starter at this point and not the 2 to 5 to 4 that I've mentioned in other, I'm going to be modifying this recipe just a little bit to change the amount of flour and water that I add. So it's not technically his recipe, but I'm not going to show you his recipe because it's a book and it's a copyright issue and it's his thing. But if you search the internet, you might be able to find it. I will give you my steps as I go along. So one thing about Ken Forkish and his recipes is that he always prefers to mix everything by hand, and he has these awesome 12-quart clear plastic containers by Cambro that I have ordered one. It's on the way, but in the meanwhile I've got this great enameled spaghetti pot that I like to use. So for this recipe, I've adjusted the amounts of things based on the fact that I have all white flour instead of some wheat and some rye, and the fact that when I've done this before, I've overwatered it and come out with some really super soupy, unusable dough. So we're trying this as kind of an experiment. And so here we go. I am starting off with 900 grams. That's nearly a pound, 900 grams of bread flour. This is not all-purpose flour. This is bread flour. It has a higher content of protein in it, about 13%. This is actually a sort of a DIY bread powder that I did my own self by taking regular all-purpose flour and adding an appropriate amount of vital wheat gluten, which is what makes bread flour instead of regular flour. To this, I am adding 600 milliliters. That's 600 grams of warm water. This is the Autolyse process. This step is just adding flour to water and mixing it together and letting it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so I added that 600 and I mixed it around a little bit, and it seemed a little bit too dry, so I just added another 30 grams of water, and now it's starting to be a little doughy looking and not so much of the extra dry stuff. So what we do now is we just let this sit and let the wheat and water get to know each other for about 20 minutes. "20 minutes have passed. The next step is to add the remaining ingredients into our flour. I have in this cup here 20-ish grams of plain old table salt. And I have in this cup about 215 grams of mature fed starter. That is starter that I fed this morning, and it has risen to more than double its size. It is ready to be used, and it's going to be mixed in here with this flour and water mixture that has been autolysing for about 20 minutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this salt, sprinkle it really evenly across the top. It's all going to get mixed in. And there we go. That's all right. Next, I'm going to take this starter. The starter goes in. I'm going to need to use 2 hands for this. So let me pause this and I'll put it in and show you what's next. And there you have it. We have our flour and water that we added in. We now have our salt, and we have our wild-caught yeast in our sourdough starter that is mature. We need to mix this up and make sure that it is evenly distributed. The way that he describes to do this is with the hands, using a pincher method. You could also, of course, use your hand mixer, your stand mixer, or any other mixer you have. I'm going to go ahead and try this his way. And what we do is we pinch it and pinch it. Fold it and pinch it. Pinch, 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 pinch. It kind of does break a bit. And then I'm going to give this a little while. Alright, so I've mixed that all up. You can hear the water running in the background because I'm going to do the final bit before we let this rest. You can see it looks pretty well mixed. It's pretty moist and wet and juicy, but it's very solid. So the next bit we need to do is kind of give it some folds and turns. And we'll do a couple of those and we'll let it sit for about half an hour and we'll come back and give it a couple of more. And there it is, stretched and folded and ready to wait. So we'll cover this up. We'll come back in half an hour, 45 minutes or so, give it another stretch and fold, and just take it from there. All right, so this has been sitting here for about half an hour. We're gonna just pull it out and give it another fold and stretch. Let's take a look. See, it's relaxed all across the bottom. That's great. We're glad to see that. I am going to, let's turn this off so I can use both hands to make sure I get this nice and turned. And there we are, stretched and folded about 4 times, just enough to get it to tighten up into this ball a little bit. We're going to give it another half an hour and let it expand back out, relax a bit. Been about 45 minutes since we did that last fold and turn, fold and stretch. So it seems to have relaxed pretty much throughout this pot. So let's go ahead and give it another set of folds and stretches. When I am done with that, we're going to set this aside in the corner and it is going to sit until I'm ready for bed. All right, stretched and turned and ready to rest. I'm going to wait until I go to bed, fold and stretch this one more time, and then we will have about 12 hours before it's time to get to shaping and baking. All right, here we are, giving it the last fold and stretch before we let it sit overnight. All right, so here's what folding and stretching looks like. Grab it, fold it over. Grab it, and you fold it over. Grab it, and you fold it over. Just keep doing that. And that's how we're going to leave it overnight.